Hello and welcome back to Stop and Go F1 for this, our driver ratings for the Austrian Grand Prix. Now, it is the second time of me recording this. If you have notifications on, you may realise that I have uploaded this before. I pre-recorded it, in fact. I recorded it yesterday. Because I thought, well, I'll get that out of the way so I can focus on other things tonight. But no, it's just gone out with massive audio issues. So, we'll try again. And this time, hopefully, the audio will be here. So before we get into it, make sure you like and subscribe. Big shout out to our members, Dakota and the Joyous James. If you want to join in with them in the membership and get a shout out on the videos, all the information you need is in the link in the description. Let's get into this then, because realistically, you're all here to see what score I give to two very specific people. But, as always, we must start with Kevin Magnussen. Here we go, everyone. So, Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. Wonderful weekend for the Haas. They scored more points this weekend than they have scored all last season. What a wonderful weekend it was for them. So, Kevin Magnussen, he in the sprint qualified 11th, would finish up in 9th. So I gave him a 10 out of 10 for the sprint. Then in the main race, qualifies 12th, finishes 8th, another 10 out of 10. So there you go, an average of a 10 out of 10. Oh yeah, I should have said before. I said before in the original one. The original one of this was so much better than this one, but you might be able to hear what I'm saying in this one, so we have to stick with this one. So Kevin Mag, what we do here is we give you a score for the sprint, score for the main race, then we get an average of the two, but it's weighted a bit more towards the main race than the sprint, and then that is the score that we go with for the overall score for the weekend. So Kevin Magnussen gets a 10. Nico Hulkenberg now, a race of two halves. In the sprint, qualified 17th, finished 19th, went backwards in the Haas, and I can't remember anything specifically happening to him that would cause that. Just a bad race overall. I gave him a 3 for that, especially in comparison to what Magnussen was doing in the other Haas. But in the main race itself, it was a completely different story. He qualified 9th and he finished 6th. Incredible from Nico Hulkenberg. I realise I haven't had his face on the screen. There he is. I'm telling you, the first recording of this was flawless. It was lost to all but the 6 people who clicked on it when the notification came out. But for Nico Hulkenberg, we're doing something special today. We're doing something that we've never ever done before. We're giving him an 11 out of 10. Never before have I broken my score rankings for the driver ratings, but we're doing it here for Nico Hulkenberg because I feel that finishing 6th in the Haas, especially the overtake on Perez on the last lap, was so good, and for him to be overlooked in the actual driver of the day poll, I feel we need to correct that misjustice in the world, and we're going to give him an 11 out of 10 for the main race. So overall, it is an average of an 8 for Nico Hulkenberg. Cross to Zhou Guan Yu now, who had a mixed weekend again. So he qualified last for the sprint, but he pushed up to 19th after Albon started from the pit lane. But by the end of the sprint, he'll be back in his rightful position of last. So I gave him a 2 for the sprint. Then in the main race, qualified last yet again, but made up some positions and ended up finishing in 17th place. I gave him a 6 for that. So overall, Zhou Guan Yu gets a 5. Valtteri Bottas now, here he is. Valtteri Bottas, he would qualify for the sprint in 18th and finish in 18th, so I gave him a 5 for that. But a much better time in the actual sprint race, qualifying 18th yet again, but finishing in 16th, so I gave him a 7, which is an overall of a 6. Across to the Racing Bills now, and Yuki Tsunoda, not the best, not the worst. In the sprint, would qualify 14th, would end up finishing 13th, gave him a 5 for that. Then in the main race, qualified 14th, finished 14th, gave him a 5 for that. Another 5 out of 10 for Yuki Tsunoda there, who ever since signed that contract extension in Canada, his performances have been nowhere near the standard that he set earlier on this season. Really has had a loss in form as we come into this part of the year. But Daniel Ricciardo had a good weekend. Let's talk about him. Daniel Ricciardo. So, one second, got my cursor in the right place. There we go. So, the sprint race, pretty average. 16th to 14th. So I gave him a 5 for that. But in the main race really shone. Qualified 11th, finished in 9th, got some good points for the team. I gave him a 10 out of 10 for the main race, giving him an average of an 8 out of 10. Good display from Daniel Ricciardo. Logan Sargent now, and Logan Sargent for the sprint would qualify 15th, would end up in 16th. I thought it was a pretty good display for Logan Sargent. Mix that in as well with the fact that he beat his teammate in both qualifying and the race. I gave him a 6 for the sprint. But in the race, normality was restored as he qualified 19th and would finish 19th, a mile off the pace of anyone else. Apparently he had contact on the first lap. I'm not sure who that was with. I don't think they showed the replay of it. But from there, just went nowhere. The fact that, at the end of the first lap, you had Leclerc who'd had contact and pitted, and Sargent who'd had contact and pitted, and Sargent was a good 40 seconds off the back of Leclerc. And come on, he just went nowhere from there. So I gave him a 2 for the main race, which gives him an average of a 3 out of 10. Alexander Albon, another tale of two halves for the Williams team here. Qualified 19th and would start from the pit lane from the sprint. Made an okay recovery though to come home in 17th. I gave him a 5 for that. Then in the main race would qualify 16th and finish 15th. Another 5 for that as well. So an average of a 5 out of 10 for Alex Albon in a Williams team that looked to be seriously struggling at the minute. Albon has been the specialist of getting the most out of the Williams car for the last couple of years, but even he is struggling at the minute, which shows you how bad the Williams car really is right now, and they'll be hoping for some big upgrades coming soon. A team that's had some good big upgrades is the Alpine team. Let's talk about Esteban Ocon. Esteban Ocon qualified 8th for the sprint, very good from him, and would finish 11th, so only just went backwards. I gave him a 5 for the sprint. He was kind of involved in that battle between him, Gasly and Perez during sprint qualifying, where they were all kind of just fighting each other. I think I said in the race reactions, there's no love lost between the Alpine boys, but there was no love to begin with there, to be fair. Really just not even hiding that they don't like each other anymore, and especially now Ocon's on the way out. Gasly's been given the extension. They're just publicly going, yeah, we don't like each other, and we're going to have a bit of a fight every single weekend. 5 out of 10 for the sprint. In the main race, qualified 10th, but would go backwards again to finish 12th. I gave him a 5 for that, so it's a 5 for on average for Esteban Ocon. Pierre Gasly had a much better weekend, so Gasly would qualify 9th and finish 12th in the race, sprint race, so not too different from his teammate, just one place behind in both qualifying and the race. Gave him a 5 for that. But in the main race, much better performance. Qualified 13th, finished the race in 10th, got another point for the Alpine team, and just looked pretty good whilst doing it. Some fantastic moves from him to get past his teammate, especially. So I gave him a 10 out of 10 for the race, which is an average of an 8 for Pierre Gasly. Aston Martin now are having a really weird time, because Lance Stroll, I think, did relatively well this weekend, and Fernando Alonso was god-awful. Let's talk about it. So Lance Stroll in the sprint qualified 12th and finished 10th, so I gave him an 8 for that, especially when you consider where his teammate was. We'll get onto that in a second. Then in the main race, qualified 17th, but would finish 13th. I gave him a 7 there, which overall is a 7 out of 10. Special shout-out from me to Lance Stroll for the double overtaking manoeuvre he did on Yuki Tsunoda and George Russell, when George Russell was trying to lap both of them, and Stroll gained a position and unlapped himself. Wonderful moves. Someone who didn't have wonderful moves was Fernando Alonso. Very bad weekend for him. Qualified 13th for the sprint, would go backwards and end up finishing 15th. So I gave him a 4 for that. Then in the main race, my God, he qualified 15th and would end up 18th. Really is no pace at all for Fernando Alonso, apart from, on the last lap, where out of nowhere, he set the fastest lap of the race. He was on old hards as well. He was even faster than Max Verstappen, who was on new softs. So, no idea what happened, but he had no pace for the majority of the race, so I gave him a 2 for the main race, and overall an average of 3 out of 10 for Fernando Alonso. A weekend to forget. Hopefully Aston have some upgrades coming because this just is not working out for them. Cross to McLaren now. Oscar Piastri in the sprint qualified third, would finish second. So I gave him a 10 out of 10 for that. Wonderful result, beating Lando Norris as well, and beating him, overtaking him on the track, doing a great job. In the race, though, he would qualify third, but the lap time would be taken away due to track limits. A bit controversial there. I still haven't seen an angle where it looks like he actually crossed the line. So he'll be demoted down to 7th, but finish up in P2. I mean, when you look at what he's been through in that one race there, should have been on the second row, but then wasn't. Then made a good start, but had the contact with Leclerc. And then everything after that, it's like to still be in contention to be at the win at the end, I thought was a great performance from him. So I gave him a 10 for the main race as well, which overall gives him a 10 out of 10. Lando Norris now. In the sprint, qualified second, finished the race in third. I gave him a 9 out of 10 for the sprint. Then in the main race, qualified second and did not finish. So we'll talk about this again. Oh my god. This is the 4th time I have to speak about this now. But let's talk about it again. So obviously, Lando, for most of the race, was just in a very comfortable second place. Not really pushing anything, kind of in a race of his own, but then towards the end, really had the pace over Max, was able to close in on him, obviously benefited from Max's slow pit stop, but I think even without the slow pit stop, Lando probably would have caught him nonetheless, because McLaren had done a better job of saving their tyres over the weekend than Red Bull had. Then we get to the moment where he is behind, and like I've said many times, I thought the dive bombs that he was trying to pull off weren't right. And I know I put a clip out before, and I think everyone's misconstrued what I said, or maybe I didn't explain it the right way, one or the other, because some people seem to think that I think that doing a dive bomb is illegal, which I don't. What I think is illegal is being so far back and doing a dive bomb that you push yourself and the guy you're attacking off the track. I think that's illegal. And then some people have also said, but Max Verstappen dive bombs, and I go, yeah. And, the dive bombs where Max pushes himself and his competitor off the track should also be illegal because that's against the rules of the race. We also had the whole thing with how many track limits violations he had. And like I said yesterday, and I'm going to stick with what I say because my opinion hasn't really changed if I'm honest with you, Max is responsible 100% for the contact that ended Lando's race. But I think Lando had established the rules of their little battle long before with some of the moves that he was trying to play. I've seen some people say, well, Max was moving in the braking zones, and I think for the first one, he was. For the second one, he wasn't as much. And then people can go, well, look at this, what happened in 2019, and look at Anthony Davidson. He put it in slow motion, and when you watch it in slow motion, it's very clear what happens. Well, in real life, things don't happen in slow motion. So, overall, though, for Lando, it was a decent race until it wasn't. So I gave him a 6 out of 10 for the main race, which on average gives him a score of a 6. Let's move on to Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, who qualified 5th for the sprint and finished in 5th, so I gave him an 8. Then in the main race, qualified 4th and finished 3rd, so I gave him a 10 out of 10. A podium there for the Ferrari, which definitely did not have the speed of the likes of the McLaren or the Mercedes this weekend. Carlos kind of just very similar to Lando in his way, having just a race of his own, not really bothering too many people for the majority of the race. He had the overtake on Hamilton at the start, and then kind of just everything happened ahead of him, and he was able to benefit. Right place, right time. So 10 out of 10 for that. On average, a 9. Across to Charles Leclerc, the man who has sold his soul to win the Monaco Grand Prix, and now has had zero luck ever since. So in the sprint, goes into anti-stall in the pit lane, and is not able to set a time, will start 10th, but manages to pull it back to a decent 7th place. I gave him a 6 out of 10 for that. Then in the main race, he qualified 6th. Had the incident with Piastri at the start. I thought that was a racing incident. It was just wrong place, wrong time for both of them. I don't think any of them was vindictive within that move. It was just racing. And then he managed to come back to an 11th place despite pitting what seemed like 100 times. So just missing out on the points. I gave him a 5 for that. So an average of a 5 for Charles Leclerc, who'll be hoping that his luck turns around pretty soon. George Russell now. Qualified 4th, finished 4th in the sprint, so I gave him an 8 for that. Qualified 3rd and won the bloody race in the main race. I gave him a 10. It's a 9 out of 10 on average for George Russell, who once again, he was called Mr. Consistent a few years ago, and I think this race was just a race, this weekend, was a weekend of just consistency from him. He has decent performances in every session and got some good results for it, especially that race win. There you go. Let's go across to his teammate, Lewis Hamilton. In the sprint, he started 6th and finished 6th. I gave him a 7 out of 10. Then in the main race, would qualify 5th, finish 4th. I gave him an 8. What can you really say about Lewis's race? Not really much, if you're honest with yourself. There was the incident with the white line, which was a very close one. Obviously struggling a lot on his tyres at that point. But, rules are the rules when it comes to the white line. And if you cross it, you cross it. I guess you can't really argue against that. Apart from that, pretty decent. So yeah, an 8, an average of an 8. Sergio Perez now. You may be confused to think that Sergio Perez wasn't competing this weekend, but he was, fun fact. In the sprint, he qualified 7th, but would go backwards to finish 8th. How he did that? I don't know. I gave him a 4 out of 10 for the sprint. Then in the main race, he would qualify 8th and finish 7th. Another 4. I mean, when you see the pace that Max was having this weekend, and again, I say this all the time, but I don't expect Sergio to be on the pace of Max, but I expect him to be a hell of a lot closer than he was. I know he was on old tyres for the sprint qualifying, but he just showed no pace ever all weekend. So, there you go. Let's go across to Max Verstappen now. Sprint race was on pole. Sprint race, he won. So that's a 10 out of 10 for the sprint race. Then the main race, pole position, again, a fantastic pole position, by the way. The speed he got there, the time he got, was incredible. Really, really impressive lap in qualifying for the race. Then kind of just dominated for most of it. Had a very slow pit stop, and then crashed into Lando Norris. And, like I've said a load of times now, that was 100% Max Verstappen's fault. If you read the comments of a short I put out, despite the fact me saying the crash was 100% Max Verstappen's fault, there's plenty of people there going, oh, Max is never to blame for anything, is he? Despite the fact that I've just said Max was 100% to blame for the crash. Some people just don't like Max Verstappen, and they're very angry on the inside, and they haven't been able to release that anger about him for quite some time because he's been doing pretty well. And now he's had a crash, they're allowed to release the anger again. You can tell it's been building up. So I'm glad that I've been able to release some of the anger for some people that can type away going, I don't like Max Verstappen. Anyway, back to this race. I gave him a 3. A 3 out of 10 for the race here because, like I said, he was responsible for the crash. And best case scenario, he has denied Red Bull a P2. Worst case scenario, he has denied Red Bull a win. Because like we saw, Lando Norris was borderline. Well, he did get the penalty for track limits. He probably would have got it either way. If Lando had gotten past Max, I don't know if he would have been able to get a 5-second gap. So Max probably still would have won either way. So it's a difficult one to say. But yeah, a 3 out of 10 for the race. And that is mainly coming from the point of view of that pole lap was really good. So deserves some praise for that. And then did dominate most of the race. So if the pole lap would have been rubbish, it would have been a 1 or a 2. But that pole lap was very good. So overall, Max gets a 5 out of 10 for the weekend there. So there you go. There are our driver ratings. Highest ratings go to Magnussen and Piastri. Lowest rating is Fernando Alonso and Logan Sargent. There you go. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. We'll be back for all things British Grand Prix, and the preview will be on Friday. So subscribe for that. Until next time, though, have a good one. Goodbye.